So, last weekend, was it last weekend? A few weekends ago, we went to Zion National Park. It's always been my dream to hike Angel's Landing, and we actually got to do it. First day was the day. Matt, what are you doing?
We're hiking up to Angel's Landing.
Yeah, we are.
Do you think the landing is the high point? Or do you think it's when people the 7 people per year fall off and they land on the ground
We
and die?
got to Angel's Landing and started the treacherous hike up. How was that for you?
Oh, it was great. I felt it kind of eased me in, and it kept on getting harder and harder as you go up. It was a pretty flat area, and then you get pretty gentle switchbacks, and you get even
Called that
steeper.
gentle switchbacks?
Well, at the very start, and then it got even more and more and more, and then it goes crazy because you're basically climbing, not straight up, but very, very steep switchbacks that are like completely man-made.
I mean, I felt like all of it was rather difficult.
I think we gained 3,000 feet
3,000,
in
yeah.
a mile. Yeah, I mean, it's very steep.
Yeah. But we finally got there. Well, not to the top quite yet. We got to the place where you can actually view the landing, and it was pretty impressive. It was extremely scary to look at, though, knowing that we were considering climbing that thing.
Yeah, and then looking at it with everybody around us telling their horror stories of why they turned around or why they couldn't do it.
Yeah. And it was just so narrow. There was so little to actually hang on to. You couldn't actually walk on it, right? You had to kind of crouch and hold on to this chain bolted into the canyon wall.
Yep. It was a lot of scrambling.
And then you can see exactly where you will fall down to your death if you were to lose any sort of footing, which was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, for much of it I was just concentrating on I won't die if I just make sure this happens. And it's usually holding on to this or making sure this foot doesn't slip or whatever it is, and just making sure that thing just doesn't fail.
Was getting to the top worth it?
Yeah. I mean, it was. My legs were all wobbly from hiking up that whole thing, but just getting to see up and down the canyon and getting to see how this little river has carved out this whole huge thing, because you're kind of up in the highlands in that point. You're really high up, and you're just kind of looking down at the history of this river that's just carved out this very big gouge.
And what was unique about it was the 360 view, right?
Great panoramas.
I know, great panoramas. Maybe I'll insert some of your panos in here.
Yeah.
It was interesting because the entire way it was just so sunny. There was absolutely no shade, and we were in the middle of the day, but for some reason, I think the fear probably overrode the discomfort of the sun, because I didn't notice it very much at all.
I would say the tiredness of the walk made me forget about the sun.
That might be it. But I'd say everything felt very rewarding in the end. So after Angel's Landing, we ended up going to visit the Weeping Rock, which we had seen in the winter time. What would you say were the major differences between Weeping Rock during the winter and during the summer?
Well, beyond the obvious, snow is, because there was a really recent snowfall, it still wasn't freezing at the time we were there, so it was melting, and so there was a pretty big waterfall caused by the snow when we were there. So it wasn't just. So I actually thought the waterfall was the Weeping Rock.
I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean there was a bunch of icicles and stuff around, so they had to dodge them. But coming back to it in the summer, I realized that the icicles were actually formed from what is the Weeping Rock.
Yeah, so the icicles are actually just frozen tears.
Yeah, they're frozen tears.
Yeah. I really loved seeing it and how different of a scenery it was. It was cool to see places where you were like, oh wow, this was completely frozen over, and now it's just this greenery that's really beautiful, and I love the contrast. Although I think I still preferred the winter version just because we had the place to ourselves. So that brings us to day 2 in Zion. That day I woke up with a really horrible back pain, but we decided to rent canyoneering equipment and make our way to the Narrows. That was a really new experience for me. I've never really waded through a river before.
It's basically this really big canyon where it's wide, it's tall, and then as you get toward the Narrows, you basically take the same vertical drop from the highlands above, which is really steep cliffs, but then they just really get tight around you, where basically just the river itself is the gap between each of the sides of the walls, and it's still hundreds of feet, in some places thousands of feet up from where you're standing, just vertical rock.
It's pretty tremendous, really. And the water was actually it was a very cold environment for me, at least. Like, the water was extremely cold. Sometimes it would get to your hips, right? Like, we'd be hip deep in some parts.
You're fighting against a current that created 1,000-foot drop of rock, right? I mean,
that's actually impressive when you put it into perspective.
Think about it that way. I mean, it took millions of years for that rock to bear away, and we were only there for a couple hours. But I mean, it's still that
the power
force
to go against that force.
Tore apart rock. Yeah.
What did you think of the moment when we actually got to the Narrows?
I thought it was really interesting to kind of just look up and you could basically see a history, much like the rings of a tree, to see how old it is. You don't get the sense of how many years it took, but you do see changing flows in the river, where there's sometimes where it bent one way and then it would stop bending and it would come back. So it was almost completely vertical except for a few little bends here and there, and you can kind of see the river just deciding for whatever reason to bend just a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way for hundreds of thousands of years potentially, and then come back to where it is currently under my feet.
I love that. The trip back was quite rough, though. Luckily, my pain didn't really kick in until after I got a lot of time to admire my surroundings, so that's good. But going back was quite rough, just given the state of my body. My body was just shaking really uncontrollably, and it became really hard for me to move because the shaking actually made my back pain a lot worse, and I just started getting very dizzy from it all. But I mean, one foot in front of the other, because I also knew there was absolutely no way for me to get out except for me walking out, and we had another 4 miles ahead of us, but we got out and it was good. Thank you.
We made it. Nancy's alive. Look at you, alive.
You did it. And now looking back, was it worth it? Because at the time you would have said no.
At the time, actually, I think at the time I would have still said yes, because I remember as I was walking back, I was thinking, if I were to die here, like just worst case scenario, if I were to die here, would this be like a worthwhile place to die? And I actually think this is one of those moments where I can actually say I wouldn't mind. It's rare that you go to a place where you're like, yeah, I wouldn't mind this being the last place that I lay my eyes on, you know?
Do you think they would have renamed it Nancy's Narrows?
Nancy's Narrows. Nancy's narrowing lifespan. Too much?
Yes, a little bit too much.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite part, or the thing that stands out to you most overall?
I really liked walking back down from Angel's Landing because I was very tired and the sun was starting to set over the canyon.
Yeah.
But it was still lighting up the canyon.
The light was so beautiful.
Yeah,
I remember taking forever because I kept taking pictures. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I kept on taking pictures with my mind. So right now, I'm still kind of running through all the images in my head because it's just kind of interesting when you're walking through someplace like that. You know, you don't know when you're going to be back, and you're kind of like, this is this great experience, and especially now that I'm, you know, getting older, and I look back at the major landmarks I've seen previously in my life. It's like, man, you just have this image of it, and you're like, man, I wish I could remember more or whatever. And so I'm just like sitting there just trying to soak it all in and just like really care about that moment.
That's nice. I don't really think about that a lot, about how I might never return to this particular area or this place. When I think about it, we really don't have much of a reason to go back to Zion when there are so many other places around us, right? It's interesting. I think that might be more on top of my mind the next time we go somewhere. I'm glad we went.
That was great.
Yeah.